Welcome to episode 67 of The Route, presented by Jobs in Sports. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. So as you can see, this is our first video podcast. We have a great guest on board, but before we get to today's guest, just a few things to go over as usual. First, if you haven't already, subscribe and follow The Route on any podcast platform of your choice. So, Apple, Spotify, etc. And additionally, follow The Route on Instagram, Facebook, any type of social media at The Route Sports. You can see in the ticker below. But other than that, let's get into today's guest. So for today's episode, I'd like to welcome someone who has started their career in communications field in South America, and they've worked their way up through Red Bull from Venezuela, Bolivia, Chile, and now to the national event and motorsport manager at Red Bull Canada. Welcome, Alejandro Burger, to The Route. Alejandro, how's it going?
Hey, Chris, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And the way I like to start every single podcast is just kind of, from the beginning. How did this career, and how do we get to here today?
Yeah, it's been a long journey for me. I can even take it back to when I was going to think about what I wanted to do in my life. I didn't know that I wanted to be in sports marketing, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Since I was a kid, I was always wanted to, be an architect, to be honest. But of course, down the time I was, getting to my teenage and all of that, I said to myself, no, that's what I don't want it. I just did my degree on advertising and marketing back in Venezuela. So I started to work in some small agencies here and there as a copywriter. But then as my dad was heavily involved as a motorsports journalist in Venezuela, I started to go to the TV stations with him. He was doing a live broadcast, so I was helping him like backstage. It's not like today's that you can see everything on live on Formula1.com live, that they give you all the stats and all that. So I was more working on the production side of things. Mm-hmm. And that's how kind of like I started to get immerse myself into motorsports, but also into production for TV and sports. Mm-hmm. And actually that's how I got my first, I would say, job with a TV station where my dad was broadcasting Formula One. And I was just supporting all other broadcasting with some data and supporting here and there. But I remember like one year they gave me the opportunity just to be on front of the camera, just talking about also Formula One, because on the side I was also being on radio stations, just kind of like talking about Formula One and all of that. And that put me in front of the camera, just talking and being on every Formula One live broadcast together with my dad, and then with another guy, and suddenly that turns into receiving a call from Red Bull Venezuela. It's like, hey, we like what you're doing with Formula One. And that was exactly the year that I started. It was the year that Red Bull Racing acquired the Minardi team in order to be in Formula One, and the Jaguar team to be Red Bull Racing. So it was kind of like all together. The TV station noticed that they needed like a young person in order to reach a younger audience. And I feel like Red Bull Venezuela identified the same thing on myself and say, hey, there is an opening here. It's related with the sports marketing. We feel that you could be a very good candidate for that if you will want to. And say, yeah, why not? Let's give it a try. The only thing that I will ask you guys is that I want to keep doing my Formula One thing, because it's just, some weekends out of the year. And they were like, yeah, we're completely fine. So that's how I started to work for Red Bull back in Venezuela. That was 2006. Mm-hmm. And I started with the sports marketing. I was doing signing athletes, doing own events, partnerships, activations, traveling across the country. And one thing took to another one. The situation in Venezuela started to go really bad for all companies, and socioeconomic problems. Mm-hmm. And that's how we had to actually shut down the operations in Venezuela at one point. And they told me, hey, Alejo, we still want you here working for Red Bull. We have an opening in Bolivia if you want to consider that. Mm-hmm. So I went to Bolivia as a field marketing manager, which was a different scope of what I was doing already in Venezuela, right? So it wasn't only about sports marketing, it was culture marketing, it was consumer collecting, sampling rights and all of that. And I did that for 2 years. It was really great experience because I was the only manager in the country at that time, because that country was also overseas from Peru. So it was a really good experience. It got me a chance to get to know a lot of people, but at the same time, try to push all of my team in order to achieve more all the time. But after 2 years, a new and better and bigger opportunity came, which it was going to Chile as a sports marketing manager for Red Bull Chile, which I did that for 3 years. Another great timing in my career. We did like amazing things. I remember one of the best events that I did there was the Red Bull Flugtag, which I think we had around 80 to 100,000 people on the beach. It was one of the hardest events also because we had to build a platform in the Pacific Ocean. So it was really tough, but ended being one of my highlights in my almost 15 years with Red Bull, right? But it got the moment that after 3 years and my wife and my kids, before we moved to Chile, we decided to apply for the Canadian residency, right? And we say, okay, let's go to Chile. Let's just spend the time there. But almost after those 3 years, we said, or we move to Canada or we stay in South America, right? But then we said, let's try something new. Let's go to a more stable, country and region. So that's why we made the jump here to Canada. And that's how I landed this role, which is at the beginning, it was the national event manager. But because I brought all of my motorsports, experience, I was just trying to, create a program for motorsports in Canada because we hadn't had that much at that time. And we know that for Red Bull, motorsports is really important because that's where all main competitors are always there, Rockstar, Monster. So that's why we say, let's now focus also on motorsports. And that's how my role shifted for only events now to events and motorsports. And again, almost 15 years I'm going to have with Red Bull by August. Great experiences, I can tell you, is like from each of these countries. But most of all is how we have been able to stay unique to our consumers. And also from a personal point of view, being able to get to know and meet so many people in so many different cultures, which again is one of the highlights in my career in Red Bull.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's already a few questions I already have in my mind and we just began. But I guess before we touch on your career at Red Bull, if we kind of go back to, how you said it all began, you're saying how, you weren't really sure that you even wanted to get into sports marketing, where it almost kind of just came naturally, right? And you're touching on the F1 job they had at the TV station, right? Was that just, did you ever have experience in front of the camera? Did you have interest in? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was 5 years. I was in front of the camera as a journalist. I was broadcasting live each Formula One race of each season from 2005 to 2009. And then I did 1 year of the GP2 series, which is the actual Formula 2, but I did it in front of the camera. So I was a journalist. I went to go to a couple of Grand Prix just to do some connection from there to the TV station. So it was great. I was feeling like, well, I could do a career out of this. But at the same time, with all the things that were happening in Venezuela, so it's like, this could be hard. And when Red Bull offered me that opportunity to say, okay, let me find a balance to do both. And that's how, I did it for a while. I did both jobs for a while.
But like, even before that, was that TV station job, was that your first time in front of the camera, or like, 'cause that seems like a big jump, no? Like, to go
it was. I was always behind the camera, right? Like supporting from a production point of view. In that year, it's funny because that year Formula One changed the rules, and they said it's like this year they're gonna have 2 qualifying sessions before the race, right? The first one, it was on Saturdays, 8 a.m. local time for us, and the second one was 4 a.m. on Sundays. So the person, the general production manager there said, it's like, hey, Alejo, we feel that you can start placing yourself on those Sundays, 4 a.m. So you can start, training, and we see that you can, be there in the next future for all races and all of that. But it was so funny that 2 weeks before the season started, I got a call from her, and she says like, hey, Alejo, by the way, there is a client who really needs to get into a younger audience. And we told them that you're going to be on the Sunday qualifyings, but of course at 4 a.m. no one is going to watch it. So they say they really want you broadcasting the race together with your dad and the other person, right? So they say, like, you have to do it because he's a big client for the entire TV station. Say, well, why not? And they just put me in front of the camera right away. So I remember that first broadcast, I had like a pile of just notes everywhere because I didn't have any experience, right? For me, it was 2005. I had 23 years old. So it was national broadcasted. So it was massive for me. But at the same time, it was a big challenge, and I took it and I accepted. I made many mistakes, but it was part of the learning process. And I had alongside my dad, who has been there for such a long time doing the same thing. and also a lot of people who care about me. So they helped me to go through those first, I would say races. It's not the only first one, but it was almost the first year. It was a tough one, but I learned a lot through the process, and it was a great timing for me. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, no, what a jump, right? Where it's almost just diving right into the deep end, and you'll figure it out. And that must be so cool, right? Where, you're doing it alongside your dad, right? Where not many people necessarily are able to maybe even work with their parents, but even just maybe do something that you're both passionate about and kind of learning at the beginning of your career, where I'm sure that's like those experiences you'll never forget, right?
Absolutely. And we had so many, stories together. It's like I was always remember seeing and watching my dad on TV when I was younger. I was like 10, 12, 14. And of course, I couldn't never engage with a Formula One at that age. It's like we're talking about 67 laps and all that. My rotation rate was for only the first 10 laps. Yeah. But I do remember one of those, big moments in Formula One, which it was when Ayrton Senna died back in 1994. I remember watching my dad broadcasting that race, because actually the accident happened during the first laps. So I was watching it there, right? But after that, I kind of like lost a little bit of, interest on the sport. But because of then, I was supporting my dad and I was just growing all of that. I said, it's like to myself, maybe I could do something with this, right? And we get the chance to, share the screen for 5 years, 5 full seasons, and they were the best. It was a really nice experience.
Yeah, I could only imagine. And I guess kind of transitioning from that, right? You're mentioning how you went to school for marketing and advertising, and obviously you're doing a job at the TV station. But how did this, Red Bull position come about? Obviously, you're mentioning how maybe they wanted a younger audience, but was it some connection you had, or like how did you go from a TV commenter to working in marketing at Red Bull?
Yeah, I didn't have any connections with Red Bull Venezuela at that time, but I think everything got well aligned because, Red Bull Racing started in 2005. I started with the TV station 2005. Red Bull Racing, and after, of course, working for them for such a long time, they get to really engage with journalists, with athletes, with contacts, and kind of like be more than a contractor or someone that they do an agreement and that's it. We like to be part of it. We like to be friends and create a stronger relationship. So they called me, they invited me to a couple of events. They had a Red Bull X Fighters, a viewing party. So they started a relation that way. So I started to get to know them. But of course, at this time, I didn't think about anything like working for them. I was just like doing my Formula One thing. It was going great. I was going here and there. But then one day they just called me and say, "Hey, Alejo, let's go for a coffee," and say, "Okay, let's do it," And that's when they offered me opportunities. Like, "Hey, would you have any interest in this?" And I said, "It's like, let me think about it." But inside in my head, I was like, "Yeah, we're talking about Red Bull, It's like I'm broadcasting Formula One. They are in Formula One now. Why not?" So that's how kind of like I started to work for Red Bull Venezuela.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how sometimes just like natural progression, right, where things just kind of land your way. Yeah. And I guess kind of even building on that, where, you mentioned at the beginning how, you have different experiences with Red Bull and all these different markets. And I'm kind of curious from maybe like a Red Bull standpoint, when you go from like Venezuela to Bolivia, are your processes different, or do you guys kind of maybe still kind of engage the same way?
We try to engage in the same way, no matter where we are, right? We have our processes very well aligned, but it's more when it comes to the local culture, that's when it becomes a challenge sometimes. And you also have to learn from it. I remember when I went to Bolivia, for me, one of the most impactful things that I had in front of my head is that the office was almost shut down every day from, I think it was 12 to 2 p.m. because it was lunchtime, and I almost had to leave the office, because they needed to close it down. I was like, guys, it's like, we still have a bunch of things to do. Why I cannot keep working until whatever 4 and then I go home, or 5 earlier? So that was kind of like one of the things I had to learn through the process, because when you move from one place to another one, you cannot come and try to implement what you had in other places if you believe that in that new place it's not going to work, or it's not going to go well along with the people who live there and knows and understand that there is a different type of mentality. But at the end, we were aiming for the same goal. So sometimes you have to adapt yourself in order to let them work with you and achieve the same goals as you were working anywhere.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And actually, when I was in university, we had to take a course about that. And I remember, I think there was one whole week where I almost went into just communication, whether even it was just meetings, conferences, or even emails, and how depending if you're interacting with maybe someone in China versus Germany, something that you would think is normal, at least in Canada, it could be taken as insulted there, right? Where maybe same thing for the lunch, right? If you tried cutting that out and like, no, you're taking 30 minutes and get back to work and then we'll go home early, that would maybe cause a storm, right? So yeah, definitely interesting.
I can tell you funny stories about that, and words that you will think that in Spanish will mean the same thing across South America, but they can have different meanings and very, very tough ones, you know. But on that, it was also how you work with the local teams and how you work with your communications team to, you know, reach to the audience that you want, but you're coming from outsider. You're an outsider to all of these, you know, consumer that you don't know yet. But you have to get there, really first understand how they work, what do they want, what's the best way to communicate, because something that it might work really well in Venezuela or in Chile, it might not work that well in Bolivia or any other countries. Like maybe radio stations are better suited for a campaign that you want to do here, but maybe in another country wasn't that well, you know? So for me, one of the biggest learnings is that you have to be very humble when you go and reach into a new country, in a way that you have to learn from the people who is working alongside you. You have to trust, but at the same time, you have to navigate and dig for yourself. It's like, it's actually what they're telling me, it is what it is. Yes, you have some level of trust, but at the same time, you have to do your own diligence in order to really identify if what you're thinking goes aligned with what you want, and also if what they're telling you is also well aligned with what you want. So it's kind of like a balance of what you can mix, because you cannot come into a new country and say, I'm going to do what I have learned, or you cannot be like that, because it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, of course. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess one of the other questions I had regarding kind of, you know, working these different markets for this kind of the same company, you're saying how maybe the processes are the same, but when you kind of look at South America and, you know, Red Bull as a whole there, are your focus is maybe a specific country and going for, you know, the people in those markets, or is it kind of just kind of growing it in the continent as a whole? Or do you guys kind of get a little more specific?
It's country by country, right? Okay. So my specific roles were Bolivia, was the field marketing manager for Bolivia. So my solely focus was on Bolivia. When I went to Chile, it was the same thing. And here in Canada, of course, we are a global brand that we get a lot from our HQ in Austria, but we have to give a local face to our brand. You know, we are in 176 countries, but each country, again, is completely different. So sometimes I think that it might work from Austria and works for USA, for Canada, for Europe, it might not go well, you know, in South America. So you have to find ways how to stay credible and unique with the consumers. So it was always focusing to try to find that balance between a global brand, but giving a local face, so everyone feels like identified with the brand and, you know, have a bigger intent of purchase.
For sure. And then I guess building on that too, I think you mentioned at one point how maybe you're working with athletes and signing them and so forth. Would it be specifically just athletes in Bolivia, or maybe athletes that are maybe Bolivian that are kind of operating elsewhere? Like how does that go about?
Well, I didn't have any specific athlete in Bolivia, but I had a few in Venezuela. I actually was one of the ones involved in hiring Daniel Ders, a BMX park athlete from Venezuela that when I started to work for Red Bull back in 2006. The person who hired me, who was the regional sports marketing manager, told me, it's like, hey, have you heard about John Doe called Daniel Ders, who is BMXer and all of that? It's like, no idea, man. I'm just landing in this job. So I started a relationship with him, and then kind of like we ended signing Daniel Ders. And right now, I think he has won 5 gold medals at X Games, and he's going to the Olympics now. In Chile, I work with many other athletes. And when you work with athletes, it's just not only about, hey, you write a check, see you next year, sign this agreement. For us, is that how you build that relationship for mutual benefit, right? When they do something really good, it's for you, but then when you also support them, it's all going to help them in the same way to help you, right? So we did many athlete projects. We support them with some functional tools that they needed, or some training in order to get better. And that's how is the other side of my experience, that is right now in Canada might be only events and motorsports, but I also try to help and support the athletes. And I did it back in Venezuela, in Chile, and here sometimes we just connect with the athlete marketing in order to do more for our athletes. Yeah,
no, for sure. And I've definitely over the years just kind of looked into whether it's even just Red Bull does such a great job with storytelling. I think that's only getting bigger, right? Especially with the way people kind of digest content. It's all through like video and kind of standing out. And I remember maybe I was in high school and I would be seeing these videos in Austria of like their campus. And, initially when I was younger, I always just thought of, Red Bull as, an energy drink. But then, you're seeing, at least in Canada, like Mark McMorris, a huge snowboarder.
Yeah.
And then when you see his different content that he's doing, even whether it's on MTV or specifically with Red Bull YouTube, you'd see how like Red Bull always has that manager with him, kind of supporting him through these different events or even training and helping him with basically life, right?
Yeah.
And even just providing him with training. And I just felt like, oh, wow, that's crazy. That's something I wouldn't have expected. And as I've gotten older, maybe dive more into marketing, gain experience in that, it makes sense, right? Because it's more popular the athlete gets, also through success, the better it is for the brand, and it'll just correlate. So it's a win-win for both parties to be invested in one another. So that's for sure interesting.
Yeah. Just to touch base on that, is like one of the most important things for us is that we start a relationship when they're younger. It's like when they're, starting to get noticed. So at that moment, they need a lot of support from our side. That's a moment that they're going to get approached by many companies. I want to give you this. And sometimes it will be, more money and all of that. But sometimes at that age, you have to teach them that it's not only about money at this time in life. If we believe that someone has a career in front of them, like it's better to treat it the best way from the beginning and not midway through. I signed a great deal with another partner, and then after 3 years, that partner didn't want to sign again, and then it's harder for another company to come on board to try to clean there. That's why for us it's really, really important to start the relationship when they're younger, and then develop that relationship, because that creates a bond between of what we're giving and what we're receiving, and at the same time is the other way for the athlete itself.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, right? Where, sometimes it's probably hard, right, for a young athlete to, I don't know, one check versus the other, and they're kind of just looking at the money standpoint. But then if you're kind of offering all these different benefits, right, to make them a better athlete, connect them with others, kind of grow their brand as well, then it's almost kind of outweighing the benefits, even though maybe there's not as much cash or something at the beginning. So that's very interesting. Even what you're saying in regards to like, bring athletes on board when they're younger, that's something I didn't even like think about, right? Where it makes a lot of sense, because when they're younger, that's when they're kind of going through the trials and tribulations, right? Where, they're having issues with their career, they're having injuries, they need support. They don't know how to, cope with fame or all these different aspects they're not used to. And,
they might be, they might be the best, but they are not mature enough yet, right? And that's when we come on board and we support through all that process. And we have a very, throttle like process to sign athletes. But that's part of it. It's like, there might be many kids or, 16, 17, 18, they're getting there, but we have to be very precise to the ones we really pick and the reasons why. It might be many different reasons, but that's part of the things. And one of the other, things that we applied when it comes to event marketing motorsports is long-term plans and approach. And it's the same is applied to an athlete, and that's why we start with them when they're young. So
yeah, that's interesting. Does that mean you guys also have like a, like let's say you look at soccer, football, hockey, whatever sport you want, like these different clubs have scouting within themselves? Would Red Bull also having like a scouting department kind of to identify these athletes when they're younger?
More than a scouting department, it's just that we have an athlete marketing department that is, it's not that they're solely focused on that, but we also have regional teams across Canada, and each country works differently, right? But part of their job is also to tell us or tell the athlete marketing team, hey, I've been hearing a lot about this athlete. He's doing this. He's already doing backflips. He's only 13 or whatever it is. So our athlete marketing department can get all that info and start, placing this person in the radar and say, hey, we might see a future here. So let's keep an eye and maybe start the connections sooner than later and all of that. So more than scouting, that is not a company that we scout for. Yes, we work with many, managers out there. For us, it's just more like, working with the regions team and get to know a lot of people so they can see us with all the information that we want.
No, that makes sense. And I guess kind of going now to more immediate term and with yourself in Canada, do you mind maybe sharing like what is like a typical month, let's say, look for you? Obviously, some months are different from others, but what type of things are you working on, and like what kind of things do you do?
Yeah, so a typical month out of COVID, of course, it will be
Yeah.
very different from now. But a typical one for me, there is a lot of traveling
Mhm.
with my role. My full responsibility is on execution of events, but we sometimes make the mistake to think that because we work on event marketing, we're just event producers, and that's not the role, right? For us, an event marketing is a person who can actually connect all departments in order to amplify what we're doing with a specific property, right?
Mhm.
So one of the most important things of my role is just to how can an event that I'm doing and I'm planning to do helps the other department to help me and help them in return. Example of that is like if I'm planning for an event, how a brand marketing can help me to support my event in order to get more participants, more spectators, but at the same time, when they do that, how can they get more brand awareness through
Mhm.
their campaign? The same it goes with field marketing, the same goes with off-premise or sales department, media network to tell stories and all of that. So most of my job is that I do an event kickoff and I try to guide them to help me with my event KPIs, but in a way that they can also feel that they're getting something in return out of not only helping me, but also kind of like what they need. So a full month will be a lot of meetings, just connecting, giving updates on how the events are going to some events, meeting with a lot of third-party organizers, working on partnerships with their legal departments. So I feel like I also work like really close with all regional teams because
Mhm.
in each region we have one specific field marketing, especially who is dedicated to our own events. So I work really close with that person in a
Mhm.
way to try to uh, teach them, but at the same time they're the person who comes to me with ideas and we brainstorm. So I feel like, to be honest, and that's one of the most challenging things that I've been able to develop through the years is
Mhm.
that I can tackle many topics at the same time. But it's just a way, how can you prioritize which one needs to be tackled right away
Mhm.
without forgetting about the other ones? You still have to at least move on a little bit. I'm the type of person that I dedicate my week to everything that I have in my plate. It's like whatever it is, I just move everything a little bit forward until I'm completing. Of
Mhm.
course, when there is an event coming up, the 1 week or 2 weeks before, depending on the size of the event, I fully dedicate to that. It's like
Mhm.
I'm just fully immersed into this execution mode. We execute the event, tear down, post grab reports, and then I kind of like go back to where I was before the event because it gets to a point that it's very challenging to try to stay on top of everything that we're doing because at the end, my role is not only event marketing, it's motorsports. I also help with partnerships, third party event support. I
Mhm.
manage with the teams all the infra that we have in the event cars. So there is a lot of going on. It's just a way how can you organize yourself to keep things going on and stay communicated with the entire team.
Yeah, no, and that's very interesting. Where I think that's applicable to all sorts of people, right? Whether it's someone listening that's in sports already, like a manager, or even someone that's just beginner, even like a student, right? Because sometimes you get overwhelmed with work or studies, and you're like, oh man, you almost get so overwhelmed you just stop doing it, right? Because you think if you stop, it goes away, but in reality, it doesn't. And that's kind of
Exactly.
interesting standpoint to maybe just pinch away at every little thing rather than trying to go one, two, three in consecutive order. So that's
Yeah.
very interesting.
I have learned that if you tackle one at a time, there is something that's gonna get burned. No matter what you do, because you will not have the time to do everything. So that's why you have to move everything a little by little,
Mhm.
and then you have to prioritize yourself. That is something that is really important right now. Focus on that, finish that, and then you move on with the next things. So I will suggest that for me, it's been working really well.
No, no, for sure, and clearly it is. And I guess kind of as we kind of end the interview here, one of the other questions, kind of just to wrap it up, is you're touching on these different things that you learned, right? And that's one of the things how it allows you not to leave something burned. If you were to kind of go back, let's say 15 years when you're first starting with Red Bull, or maybe someone that's maybe listening who's an intern at Red Bull now, what's maybe something that you'd give in terms of advice
Hmm.
for like success, right, inside Red Bull or even elsewhere?
I will say that be very humble.
Mhm.
Sports marketing is a world that everyone would love to be part of it, and there's so many people that they will just come with the chest inflated. It's like, well, I'm here because I know a lot about this sport or that. It's like,
Mhm.
for me, I'm a person that I will say that yes, I have a lot of focus on motorsports because of my background. But there are many things that I have to learn with the time. It's like I came to Canada without not knowing anything about hockey or snowmobiling. But right now I'm doing a snowmobile event called Red Bull Sled Hammers, but I had to take time, and that's what it means to be humble. It's like you cannot come and think that you know everything because you know about something. It's like you have to learn. You have to take all the information that you have available to you. You have to reach out to all the person and people that they might help you. But if you stay humble and committed to what you want to achieve with your career, you're gonna have a long way in sports marketing.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's that's directly relevant to the podcast, where I get messages from sometimes even, directors at, sporting organizations and say, oh, I loved listening to this person. Even myself, just, speaking to someone like you or other people, there's always something to take away from, right? And that's kind of the reason why the podcast still goes, because regardless of anything, whether you say something or the next person says something, I'm always with, the notepad. There's something that I'm going to be able to apply to my career, and I'm sure everyone listening as well. And just two final questions, and they're fairly quick. So you touched on maybe something in regards to career, on how to, be humble. Do you have any maybe life advice that as well that would, kind of go forward for maybe someone that's younger, or even someone who's maybe even the same age or older?
Yeah, I will say that from a life point of view is that take the risk that you feel that you are able to tackle. I had to take many risks in my life. It's like going to Bolivia was one risk, then to Chile, and then to Canada. I've been always having the need of taking the risk in order to improve myself and improve to everyone that I'm capable of, because so often we get into thinking that you're not capable of something until you don't prove it, right? So that's more or less my mentality all the time. It's like, until I don't make it happen, I cannot prove to even myself that I'm able to. So I have to do it, and I somehow force myself to do it. When I came here, one of my first tasks, it was the Red Bull Crash Ties in Ottawa. It was the 150th celebration of Canada. Of course, I knew about Crash Ties when I was back in South America because of Red Bull, but Crash Ties, I saw that like, no way. And then I did it together with a team, and it was an amazing event. We even had Justin Trudeau attending the event. It was awesome from every point of view. So it was one of my highlights out of all of the events that I have done, but only through that, only by being humble and taking the risk in order to really, make yourself thinking that, yes, what you're doing is really worth and it makes sense for everything.
And that kind of transitions to the last question perfectly. But on that note, that was a cold night, wasn't it? I remember that was really cold.
Yeah, I was lucky because I was inside the event controls. It was fully heated with some, food and water and Red Bull. But I was, I think, minus 37 or something. We still had like 60,000 people, which it was amazing.
Yeah.
And my feedback to the team, it was like, this is Canada. It's like, you cannot play with the weather, but people will still show up. And for an event like that, I was so amazed to see that many people under that cold night.
Yeah, I remember that. That's one of the things I'll remember about that event. But you're just touching on how that was a highlight maybe of your career so far. And the kind of the last thing that I kind of ask is, maybe when you're 104 years old on your rocking chair, just thinking about your career, is there maybe a specific story that stands out? Or like, wow, I can't believe I was able to kind of do that for work.
There are many, and many there are funny ones. It's like, but one of the biggest one that I will say is that I even had the chance to go to the Antarctica.
Wow.
We had a surfing project with Ramon Navarro, who used to be our surf wave athlete back in Chile, and he always had this dream in going to Antarctica because that's where the swell starts, right, in the Pacific Ocean. So I transferred from Bolivia to Chile, and my marketing manager, my friend Pablo, is like, hey, we have been thinking about this project over the past 2 years. You have to make it happen. And it was a very long or interesting project because, as you know, the Antarctica is just is not owned by anyone. It's just divided by many bases of many countries. But we just went straight with the Chilean one, and we say, hey, we just want to plant a flag of being one of the first ones to surf in Antarctica or looking for a big wave. And it was such an amazing trip, but it was really a hurdle just to be in there. I remember the time that we went, I think it was November or December 2013 or 14. The days were 22 hours of flight. It's like we were just working around the clock just to, hey, there is a swell coming in. Let's just go out, pick up everything, cameras, everyone. Let's just go out and surf. And without the unknowing out there in the water, it's like everything. But I would say that was like a massive highlight for me in my career.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's one of my bucket list items. I want to go to Antarctica one day, but it just seems so crazy still. But definitely something I'd like to do. But yeah, no, this has been amazing. Time's flown by. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the episode.
No, thanks for your time, and I feel like for everyone who is out there trying to immerse themselves into sports marketing, it's just like, again, stay humble, stay committed, read a lot. One of the most important things on sports marketing is that you know almost a little bit of everything, which is really hard. You need to know a little bit of golf, tennis, Formula One, and then is snowboarding, is hockey, whatever it is. You have to know a little bit, because that's the way they'll open you up the doors to anything. It's like, if you stay into one lane only, okay, you might do really well, but you're going to be missing the rest of what sports marketing means, which is just reaching as many people as possible, what they're doing, what they love, which it can be many different playgrounds.
For sure. So I know I said done, but one last question on that.
Yeah,
do you have any books? You're saying, read a lot. Is there specific books that stand out to you as you say that?
Not really, man. I'm not like a big book reader. I like to read, like, I remember like the past one, it was the Formula One book about Ayrton Senna and many other ones. But I mean, like, for me, reading is more on the news, staying on top of the news, and like big articles are coming out. So I always stay on TSN or, CBC Sports. I get into Sports Illustrated or many other ones that are sending a lot of information. And that's part of the final job. It's like you have many things to do, but at the same time, that's part of your job. Stay updated what is going on in the sports marketing world.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I'm sure that's some great tips for everyone listening, even for myself. I'm writing these all down. So cool. Yeah, that's a great way to end the episode. And thank you so much for coming on.
No, my pleasure. Anytime.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you.